Hello, my name is Rick Houston, and welcome to the Scene Vault Podcast, your source for all things NASCAR history. Presented by QWare. Maintain excellence.
I don't know. Everybody was kind of frustrated with me. I said, we're going to be all right. So we set on a pole, new track record, led the most laps, and won the race.
In the show car.
In the show car. How about it?
The day NASCAR and all of us associated in any way with NASCAR forget its past, that's the day we don't have any future.
Steve, you got your start working for Tex Powell and building cars for guys like Benny Parsons back in 1974, and then you went to work at Petty Enterprises late the following year in 1975. How did that come about?
Well, Tex Powell and Richie and Les Bars and Jimmy Kowalczyk started a company called Carcraft in Asheboro, North Carolina, and they built Benny's cars. A year or so into it, Richie and Les decided to go do something else. So Tex said, well, myself and Jimmy Kowalczyk will stay here. So I moved down from upstate New York in July of 74. And I had been to the Petties and knew a couple guys there, knew Richie. And I went in there, and they just decided I didn't have enough experience. I said, that's fine. And Richie said, just go see Tex. So I went down to see Tex, and he was just wonderful. You know, I'm a kid, super wet behind the ears, you know, just about to die to do something. And he taught me a lot. We worked very hard. We had a great time. On weekends, if it was nearby, we would go to the race and help Benny's guys. So it was a really good opportunity for me. And then the summer of 75, I was a little restless to do something different. Tex racing wasn't as big then as it ultimately was. And I was just kind of wanted to work on a big team. And Bud Moore was looking for somebody. David Iff told me that. And Tex had worked for Bud Moore. And he said, I know your personality, Steve. He said, you're pretty kind of quiet about things. And he said, Bud Moore's going to eat you alive, don't you? And he was right. But I never.
I can't imagine.
I never went down there. And the Petties were looking for somebody, and Tex heard about it. And Tex is actually the guy that told me, and he called Chief. And Chief said, "Okay, send him up here, and we'll talk to him." And the first thing Chief said is, "Don't let your buddy Tex down." So it worked out very well for me. I went right in the door and went to work. Didn't make a whole lot of money, but learned an awful lot from the Petties and worked my way up there. I was there for 7 years altogether.
What did you do for him initially?
When I first started, I was a fabricator, putting bodies on cars, and built a lot of kit cars with Richie Bars. And I was fortunate that Richie Bars took me under his wing. He looked out for me, taught me a lot of things. Was hard on me, but it was easy for me because I had a pretty okay work ethic, but I just didn't have enough experience to really be doing what I was doing. But I learned almost every day there, and it worked out very well.
Good.
You had been in the sport about a year, and you joined Petty Enterprises, and Richard wins a championship that year. How big a deal was that for you?
At that point in time, Richard was supposed to win championships, you know, so it wasn't, you went to the Petties, you expected to win a Daytona 500 or two and a couple championships, and at that time, that's how it all worked out. And I got there after Dover in September, and when I went to work that Monday morning, they were all mad at not Benny, but Travis Carter, because Travis Carter hollered something at him as they were leaving the racetrack, because that's the race. I don't know if you remember, but Benny was leading, and Richard got down a bunch of laps, and Buddy Arrington kept bringing out cautions, and Richard made up like 7 laps or something like that. So that was what the talk was all that day. So
Buddy denies it.
Yeah, Buddy didn't know anything about it, and it was just a whole new opportunity for me. But you were in the big time, so you really expected to do things like winning championships. And as I said, it was late September. I had very little to do with it.
Well, the finish of the 1976 Daytona 500, one of the greatest finishes in history. What do you remember about it? And were you one of the guys that tried to push him across the finish line?
No, because as soon as everybody started to bolt over the wall, the NASCAR officials went crazy, and Richie Bars ignored them. Obviously, that's Richie Bars. And 2 or 3 others went on and did it, and Chief stood there the whole time, and all he wanted somebody to do was he said, pull the wires off, pull the wires off, pull the wires off. And we're like, wonder what Chief was talking about. Well, he wanted us to pull the wires off of Pearson's car, the plug wire. so he couldn't crank it and drive across the start-finish line first. But no, there wasn't that many that went across, and those that did got a little bit of screamed at by NASCAR, but it was all such a great event. I think they really enjoyed it.
Steve, you had some pretty big names on that team. Obviously, you had Richard, you had Maurice, Chief. You had Dale Inman. I believe Barry Dodson
Barry was there,
was there at the time. What was it like to be learning from people of such a huge, huge stature?
The biggest thing I learned quickly was that it was compartmentalized. You had people that took the oil tank out every week and cleaned it and put it back in. You had Uncle Bottle Milliken, who was Patty's uncle, and he dismounted all the wheels and tires and cleaned everything up and pulled the interliners out. And a bunch of us built things, control arms, and looked at the K-members, the front suspension pieces that came out of the car, did a lot of MagnaFlux. And then across the street in the new buildings where they put everything together. So everybody kind of had their job, and what was good about my position was I was under Richie Bars, and he did a little bit of everything. So I got to learn everything.
Okay.
And that was... Other than that, I don't think it had been that enjoyable because my idea was to learn how to do everything as quickly as I could and hopefully become good at it.
You left at some point in '78, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
And
Yes.
to go to work for Jerry Cook.
Yes.
What was your reasoning behind that?
I had felt like,
For his modified.
to Rick's point, I'd basically been in big time auto racing a year, and I was concerned that maybe I hadn't learned enough to be where I was at Petty Enterprises. In other words, I said, man, I need to step off here and see if I can do something by myself. So Jerry Cook was looking for somebody for the year to run with him. He was at Bowman Gray, and he said, why don't you just come with me? So
Bowman Gray.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
I had everything I owned was in 3 grocery bags, and it was all clothes. I didn't even have luggage. And I jumped in the truck and went with him, and I went from this incredibly big shop with 40 people working in it called Petty Enterprises to Jerry Cook, where it was just myself and Jerry. And nuts and bolts weren't in cabinets. They were in Chasing Sanborn cans and things like that. So if you're going to get something done, you had to do it. So I felt like it was a May till November period where we ran about 87, 90 races. And if something was going to happen, you or Jerry were going to do it.
Yeah.
And it really made me feel like I was capable of doing something. And then some way Kyle got in touch with me and said, I'm going to start racing. He said, Dad wants to know if you'll come take care of my car.
Right.
But anyway, I just needed to prove to myself that I was worthy almost.
Yeah.
So you do go back to level cross, and you're going to be Kyle's crew chief.
Yes, sir.
Early in his career. What do you remember about those formative years? Obviously, you won at Daytona.
Yeah.
But then...
The biggest thing I remember is back then you had different height spoilers that you bolted on the back of the deck. It wasn't a matter of bending things around and all that. So we just had different heights. There was no minimum. And we sent Kyle out because he was comfortable as could be, and he's so cool. He wasn't worried about anything with an inch spoiler. So me and Richard are
an inch.
Richard and I are standing on top of the trailer just timing them and watching them. There wasn't much electronics then. And he said, "What spoil you got on there?" And I said, "The inch." And he said. And he got down that ladder, and Richard's got a funny way when he walks really fast, And I said, "What are we doing?" He said, "Get him in, get him in." He thought he was going to hurt himself, but ultimately it all worked out okay,
Wow.
and we won the race. But after that, Richard wanted Kyle to do a lot of things, so we bought a dirt car from Hoss Ellington and rebuilt that, and we went to an ARCA race in Nashville to drive somebody else's car, and we got there and the car wasn't. Bunch of things looked scary on us, so we just came home, and then we took the Magna to Talladega, and I think we ran 8th in it, Michigan, things like that. Crashed trying to qualify 4th of July. So it was a bit of a rough year.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure. I know Lee was involved more than people know, and I'm not really sure that there was enough money to race Kyle or there was enough interest family-wide to race Kyle. So Richard came to me that fall, and he said, "You're coming over on my car." And I said, "Okay, that's cool." So I went to work under Dale for Richard.
And when Dale left for Osterlin after the Daytona 500 in 1981, you were like a co-crew chief with Wade Thornburg?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, had you gotten any indication that Dale was going to leave, and what was the team's mood afterward?
The first indication I had was when Dale kind of choked up in Victory Lane at Daytona and told his wife Mary, "I'll be home tonight." And I thought, wonder what's wrong there. Maybe Mary's sick or something. I mean, that's how. I mean, we just had our heads down.
You had no idea.
No,
really? Wow.
We saw one long conversation. There were two buildings that were parallel to each other, separated by about 100 feet of asphalt at the patties, and we were in the building where we built cars, Richie Bars and I, and across the street were Dale and Richard in a really long, drawn-out conversation in January that year. I thought, man, I wonder what's going on there. But there wasn't a clue, which Dale's really cool about stuff like that.
Yeah.
He wouldn't let that on, but it was rough. People didn't know who was going to be the boss and how it was going to work out and all that. You know, Wade wasn't excited about being a co-crew chief, and eventually he's like, man, just take care of that mess. You know, I want to do what I've always done, and it was tough. We won 2 races. We won North Wilkesboro and Michigan. We were happy about that, but by '82, the load of, I think, running 2 Cup cars with basically 1 Cup car's budget had gotten a little tough, and I decided to step away and go do something else.
Now, at some point, you did move on, and you went to build cars during the week. Who was that for? Was that back with Tex?
No, with Jay Hedgecock.
Okay, all right.
Remember when Richard rolled his car down the front street?
Yeah.
Okay, Jay Hedgecock built that car. Now, I wasn't there then.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, he's a pretty famous, very famous late model stock car builder in High Point, North Carolina.
And you were also Ron Bouchard's crew chief.
Yeah.
Who was he running for at the time? Was that Race Hill
Farms?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Jack Beebe, wasn't it?
Yeah, Jack Beebe, and somehow Jack and oh man, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name right now. The guy that was in charge,
Bob Johnson.
Bob Johnson had gotten crossways. And,
I can't imagine Bob Johnson crossways with anybody.
So they said, will you change front tires for us? Yeah. So we went to Daytona, made some changes and talked about things. And they said, man, you need to be the crew chief. I said, well, I'm not moving to Connecticut, but we'll do whatever we need to do. So we ran 3rd there, went to Nashville the next week and ran 2nd. Went to Pocono next week and ran 3rd. Well, Jack's all excited, and he doesn't have somebody screaming at him all the time. And Ronnie doesn't have somebody screaming at him either. But
yeah.
So they said, just come to Connecticut. I said, no, I got a wife and 2 little kids, and I'm going to travel my whole life racing, and I want my wife to at least have her parents and, all the people she grew up with around her for support, because I'm not going to be there that much. So they eventually hired David Ift, and then David didn't go to Connecticut because they moved down and bought the Dygard shop and raced out of there.
Well, now, Dale Inman wanted you to come back and work at Hagan Racing with him and driver Terry Labonte.
Yes.
Okay. What was it like working with him again? And this time, you had more experience.
Well, I was still just a broke old racer, and I needed a ride to Martinsville or maybe Charlotte. And I knew Dale commuted, so I called and said, hey, man, can I ride with you? Sure. So we went up there and did our thing during the day. We got together to come home, and we were riding down the road. He said, hey, I'm going to work at Hagan's. But the thing had already blown up with Stacy, and Earnhardt was already gone. And Dale was real frustrated with how things were going. And I said, well, what do we need to do? He said, well, I want you to come with me to Hagan's. I said, that's cool. That'd be great. It's right there in Thomas.
Simple as that.
And they had been running good. Jake was there and Joey Knuckles. And they had run, gosh, they were like 2nd or 3rd in the points in '82, and they had Budweiser coming on board. And, it looked like a really good opportunity. So we went over there and did that. Did a lot of things around the shop, built some nice cars with Eddie Dickerson. Real proud of what was going on. Had a 200-mile-an-hour Monte Carlo, which there was only 2 at that time, ours and Mr. Rainier's. And in '84, we were super prepared. In fact, Dale Inman said, in all my years, which was a lot of years even by 1984, he said, I don't believe I've ever been on a team that was this prepared. And with Terry, I think we had like 25 top 10s or something. It was incredible numbers. And Terry just comes in and does his job and doesn't tear things up. And we got lucky and won the championship, So that was really cool. It was another championship for Dale without Richard, which he doesn't crow about, but I think it was good for him internally, to say, man, I got one. I didn't have to have my cousin. And it was good for us as it relates to Chevrolet. And what was really good was at the end of 1983, the Budweiser guys were crowing at us because they were leaving, going to juniors, and we were at the banquet. And somebody said something, and Dale said, "I don't know why you're doing that." And they said, "Well, we just want to be part of a championship team. You guys just aren't big enough to win the championship." So the next year at the banquet, we're all standing there, and Dale Inman, who's a tough guy, went and found the Budweiser guy that said that, and he said, "Well, how you think it's working out now?" Which Darrell had won a lot of races that year, and he was crowing about, needs to be more bonus points for winning races and so on and so forth. But, we had the deal presented to us as it was, and, we did the best job and scored the most points and won the championship. We were tickled to death.
I think it's hilarious that you mentioned that because we talked to Terry Labonte.
Yeah.
And he told the Budweiser story.
Oh, yeah.
We talked to Dale Inman. He told the Budweiser story. And now, that was evidently a thing with you guys.
You don't forget, plus Dale Inman is not loud. He's fun, and he'll grab you, and you feel like he's going to break your arm or squeeze your head off your neck or whatever. But he is not outspoken.
No.
You'd expect that from Bob Labonte, who always sets you straight.
Right.
But for people, kind of quiet people like myself and Terry, to see Dale Inman actually kind of not step out of line, but make a statement, that really burned a hole in us.
In 1985, on Racing Reference, you were listed as the crew chief. Yes. All the way through the season.
No.
Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
Richard was leaving Curb.
Okay.
And Dale said, "Man, why don't you come back to Petty Enterprises with me?" And I said, "I don't know, let's ride over and see what we got." And we went over there one day at lunchtime from Hagan's. And, man, it looked exactly like it did when I left in 1982. I said, "Man, it's the same old deal with the same old people, and I don't feel like I'm moving ahead, you know."
Yeah.
And I didn't aspire to be a crew chief at all, but it just didn't feel like the right thing for me. And a bunch of guys left Hagan and went over there with Dale. But I didn't start being the crew chief until, again, Dover in the fall, or something about Dover in September that's always been around. But no, Dale Inman was the crew chief until then.
Now, the Hagan team experienced some pretty good financial problems.
Yes.
And so how big of an impact was that on what you're trying to accomplish?
Well, just like me and my little compartmentalized head, not realizing that Dale Inman might leave Petty Enterprises, I had no idea that Billy was in financial trouble. So I said, I'll just stay here and we'll go on about our business. And one day, Wayne King, who was the team manager, general manager, he came in and they loaded up all our Chevrolet race cars at the end of the year. Rick Hendrick had bought them, and they were, 2,900, 2,850-pound race cars, really nice little race cars we'd spent a lot of time on. And at that point in racing, you might have had 4. You know, it wasn't like everybody had to have a dozen or 20 like now. But still, I hated to see him going. I thought, what's going on? Well, then you kind of heard through the grapevine from people that were in the know. Dewey Livengood knew what was going on because he had been restricted somewhat on what engine parts he could buy. And I thought, man, what's going on? So anyway, Billy had committed to Oldsmobile, and Oldsmobile was coming in with a bang. Cale had a car, and the Jacksons had cars, and Harry Gann had cars. So what you did then was you went to Hutchinson Pagan and picked up a chassis and all the sheet metal. Hutch was the Oldsmobile sheet metal guy. And every fitting, every line, fuel cell, filler neck, seat, steering wheel, steering boxes, and you loaded it up, and you went home and built it. And then Oldsmobile car and said, go get another one, go get another one, go get another one. So it looked like Oldsmobile financed Billy back out of trouble. And he wasn't in any trouble, just oil had gone bad. The bottom had dropped out. Yeah. OPEC was pumping too much out, and, Billy lost a lot. And he had such a big company by that time. He was over in the Southeast Asia doing stuff. And he couldn't get it turned around quick enough to stop the bleeding, and he lost a lot. But we got Oldsmobile and Hutch got so far behind on supplying us cars that I was waiting on a car. I said, man, we need a car for Rockingham. So they said, just take the show car. And God, that made Bob Labonte so mad. He thought I wasn't doing the right thing for Terry. And I said, no, we are. Bob, we're not going to run a show car. We're going to come home and take it all apart and do our thing to it, put another body on it, lighten everything up. It's going to be a nice little race. Boy, the whole crowd was mad. And one thing about it is that if Bob's mad, the clan is mad. And so everybody's kind of looking at me crazy. Well, anyway, before Rockingham went to Daytona and ran second to Jeff Bodine. So like, man, maybe we're okay, you know. So went to Richmond and ran 8th. Next is Rockingham. Well, we break out the show car. So, man, you know, everybody's the engine tuner, T.A. Toombs, for whatever reason, he got mad and quit at the racetrack. I'm not sure to this day how he even got home. He lives in Randleman. But I don't know. Everybody was kind of frustrated with me. I said, we're going to be all right. So we set on a pole, new track record, led the most laps, and won the race.
In the show car.
In the show car. How about it? But we had put a lot of time and effort in the show car. And Terry Labonte did a fantastic job of holding off Harry Gant and Richard Petty. So anyway, as the year went on, it became obvious that we didn't have enough money for the good engine parts we needed. And we broke a lot of engines, and Terry got frustrated and ultimately took the job at Junior. Yeah. And Junior, I'll never forget this. We're standing in what they called at the time a urinal at Watkins Glen, which is just urinated on the wall, and it went down in a drain. And
at least it wasn't a
big time auto racing.
dirt floor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here comes Junior. You coming up there with that boy? I said, no, Junior. At that time, 421 was 2 lanes, and it was like an hour and 45 minutes or something. I said, no, I've kind of committed to stay with Billy, and that's what we do. All right, then. He zipped his bib overalls up, and away he went. You know, so that was my interview with Junior. So Terry went on and had great success, and we worked real hard to get Sterling Marlin going, and it was just had nothing to do with Sterling Marlin. We just didn't have enough money to race properly in 1987. Right.